Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. Hope everybody's well. Tzarayim Tovim, those of you who are in Israel. Let's hope we hear peace. This should be a long peace in Israel. What can I say? I don't know. I don't know what goes on there and what the calculations are, but as long as there's whatever, let's hope we have a long, long period of quiet. Anyway, okay. So we're in the fourth parak. We're in the middle in my Mishnayot. We're just finishing up Mishnah Hey, Rabbi Tzadok Omer. We were discussing last week not getting paid for Torah. Yes, getting paid. It's very bad to take money for Torah, but in today's world, this may be a little bit different. So just before we wrap that up, it's just a couple points. So at the end of class yesterday, there were very few people left online, the end of last week. So Mr. Zucker pointed out that in his Mishnah, Rabbi Tzadok, in my Mishnah, it says Rabbi Tzadok just begins that Al tasa Torah likadel. You shouldn't make the Torah a crown to glorify yourself, or a kardom, or sort of an axe to dig with. One is sort of honor, non-monetary honor. That's an atara. You wear a crown, you're seated, people give you honor. And one is to make money. You use the Torah as connections, and it gets you ins and etc. and all kinds of stuff like that. You're taking personal advantage of Torah, and Rabbi Tzadok says that's a really, really bad thing. And but he pointed out that in his Mishnah in the Siddur, Rabbi Tzadok begins, and I don't know what Pirkei of what people have in front. I'd be curious to know what you have, but I think I know what the issue is. Altif Rosh Min HaTzibur, Valtasat Mechak Korchei Dainim. Rabbi Tzadok begins, and first of all, they have it as a new Mishnah in the Siddur. It's not a continuation. It says you shouldn't separate from our community. It's nothing new. That's what Hillel had taught already. Altif Rosh Min HaTzibur, be part of the community. We spoke how important that is. And also, don't make yourself orchei dainim. The more difficult expression from also a teaching board from the first chapter in Pirkei Avot, that, I don't know, it doesn't mean you can't be a lawyer, but it means the idea that you present arguments that puts you in a favorable light only. That's very nice in a propaganda campaign. It's very nice when you're running a business. You don't have to point out negative things or whatever, but it's not true in a court of law. And so whatever, that's so orchei hadayanim, people who tailor their testimony to some favoritism that they should win, so that the Mishnah says is inappropriate. That's not correct. I don't we discussed this a little bit last year. How exactly that applies in the modern world is not so simple to know, because the entire Western legal system is based on that premise that each side presents the way. But that's not our discussion now. The interesting thing, why is that part of the Mishnah here? So I don't have a good answer, except to tell you that all the places that I checked, every time I checked a Mishnah, like a copy of the Mishnah Stura, the Yachin Beboa's Mishnah, any set of Mishnayot, it doesn't have that. It just has Rabbi Tzadok saying, don't take money for Torah. And anytime I checked the Siddur, it's in the, in most of the Siddurim, they print it after Mincha, because that's the original minhag. You learn Pirkei Avot, you said Pirkei Avot after Mincha. It's printed, and it's a separate Mishnah. I don't know. I'm assuming the Siddurim are incorrect. In other words, that was just added in because, or in other words, this happens. Listen, they're experts in this field. You know how many mistakes have crept in. You have to realize until the 1500s, we didn't have a printing press. 1400s, didn't have a printing press. And who would copy books? You'd pay somebody $8 an hour, pay minimum wage. It wasn't a high level position, and it's very tedious work. And it's extremely expensive, to own a shas. We know, I mentioned there were great Torah scholars who did not have the entire shas. So there were parts of Talmud they had never learned in their life. They never had access to it. There was no shas in their little, town. The first 10 pages were missing. It was ripped out of the book, So that's just the reality. So this is a big area. People, what do you do when we have corrected manuscripts? That's a famous story on the Rambam, that Rav Chaim Soloveitchik had great insights on the Rambam. And then they found, manuscripts that what the Rav Chaim was based on a mistaken text in the Rambam. So he didn't like that. He felt that his explanation of the mistaken text was better than the, corrected text, because, it took away the whole explanation. But so that is a common thing. So I'm imagining the editors of the Siddur, for whatever reason, added it, and I don't really know why. But that's just, as you pointed. Also, it makes it as a separate topic. The way we were explaining it last week is Rabbi Tzadok is a continuation. The first half of the Mishnah says a person who learns for the sake of teaching will get merit to learn and to teach, and if you learn for the sake of doing, you'll merit to learn, teach, and to do. And we explained doing is much better. There's no concept of learning for your own sake. That's it. Learning has to be minimum to teach, just to learn. So I should know. So that we said that the Tosfot Yontif has a very harsh explanation here, where he's explaining Rav Tzadok. That's what Rav Tzadok is saying, that the Mishnah begins. Why is it in the same Mishnah in the Mishnayot? Rabbi Shmuel says a person who learns for the sake of teaching gets X. A person learns for the sake of doing gets X plus. What about a person who learns for the sake of only learning for himself, for his own glory? He's not going to share his Torah. He just likes to learn, to sit and learn. So that's what Rav Tzadok says. That's an atara. The hikadelpam, that's using Torah for your own personal purposes. So Rabbi Tzadok is a continuation of the Mishnah. If you explain like that, it's very harshly. That, in other words, learning for the sake of learning is being heavily criticized. If you take it out and you introduce it by be part of the community and don't misplace do your judgment properly, and also don't take money as a separate thing, it has nothing to do with that. So it sort of is kind of important. It changes the whole meaning of the Mishnah, this added part of the Siddur. How exactly it happened, I don't know. The fact that it can happen, that's not at all surprising. I remember many years ago, and so of course that's what I checked just now. I had a friend of mine who now lives in Beit Shemesh, but Daniel Levy had his Sheva Brachas and got married 35 years ago. So he spoke about that in Pirkei Avot in the 5th parak. You have this coming quite starkly. The 5th chapter in Pirkei Avot, we'll get there, I don't know, this year, next year, please God, we'll get there at some point. It's Arba Mitot Badam, the 4 character traits in people. So I'm sure most people are familiar with the Mishnah. There are 4 types of people when it comes to anger. There's some people who they're very easily angered, but they're very easily appeased. And then there are people who are very hard to get angry, and it's very hard. But once they get angry, oy vay vay, they can never be appeased. So in all the Mishnayot, it says that the person this is in my Mishnah, 5th parak, 11th Mishnah, somebody who's noach lichos v'noach lirtzot, he's easily angered, but easily appeased. Yatzas charo behefsado. The reward, the good part that he's easily appeased is wasted because he's always angry. True, you can always appease him, but he's always getting angry. So yatzas charo behefsado. Whatever schar, reward, he loses that behefsado. Kashelichos, one who's really tough to get angry. It's true, it's very hard to appease him once he gets angry, but he's really hard to get angry. Yatzah hefsado b'scharo. So the fact that he's very hard to appease is watered down. That loss doesn't really count because he gets the benefit of not getting angry too much. So if you look, I have here now the new Art Scroll Siddur. So this, I'm not the Art Scroll, this is the RCA Siddur. And he had pointed this out, although the Art Scroll has it like the Mishnah, at least this one. But in the Mishnah here, in the Siddur, the RCA Siddur, it says the exact opposite. It says, Noach lirtzot v'noach lichos, the one who's easily angered and easily appeased, yatzah hefsado b'scharo. The loss, no big deal. Because so what, he gets angry all the time. He's easy to appease. So it's the opposite. Yatzah hefsado b'scharo. Kashel lichos v'kashel lirtzot. If he's really hard to get him angry, but hard to appease. So that good part, that it's hard to be get him angry, yatzah hefsado, yatzah scharo behefsado. So that good is offset by the bad. In other words, the Mishnah and the Siddur are arguing which is a better quality. The one who's easily appeased, is easy anger, is that his loss is offset by his gain, or his gain is offset by his loss. So it's very interesting. 2 different opinions. Probably whoever edited, whoever put it, that's you could argue which is better, which is worse. The best, of course, the Mishnah says, person who's hard to get angry and easy to appease. And then you have people who are easy to get angry and hard to appease. Those are the 2 extremes. But the 2 in the middle, which one is better or worse? that seems to be a debate between the Mishnah and the Siddur. But be that as it may, I just pointed out you have this all over the place where you have different Girsaot. There's a whole book, the Duke Sofrim. This was written 150 years ago before computers, gathering all the different source materials. I mean, this is something the Vilna Gaon actually was very into. Surprisingly, perhaps, you wouldn't think the Vilna Gaon was onto manuscript. It's generally a topic ignored in the yeshiva world, getting a corrected manuscript. And of course, it's something very important in the academic world, getting a proper manuscript. And this, of course, is a debate. I may have mentioned this one famous view of the Chazon Ish, who died in 1950s, the leading, Haredi rabbi with the creation of the state. I don't know what they were called. It wasn't called Haredi, but whatever. And he was very opposed to manuscripts. He said, that's from heaven. That's from heaven. In other words, if the fact that we discover a new manuscript or corrected manuscript, we don't change. If we've had for 500 years learning the Shulchan Aruch without a lo instead of, with a no instead of a yes, that's the way God meant it to be. We believe God sort of helps us in our trajectory of halacha. There is Sod Hashem L'Rayav. God sort of helps the dayan, the judge. So if that mistake crept in, we don't correct the mistake. That view, by the way, is held by Rav Soloveitchik. Also was very much into that view. The Masorah, that's one of the reasons Rabbi Soloveitchik didn't believe in Tchelet. I mean, what he would say now, I don't know, because Tchelet was just being discovered, but he did not wear Tchelet. He felt that we need a tradition. We don't go based on academic research. It's very nice. That's not how Judaism works. Our halachic system works on a Masorah, a transmitted oral transmission from generation to generation. We lost what Tchelet is, so therefore we can't reinvent it, even if it's 100% accurate from a scientific point of view. And that's why Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, of course, his son-in-law did not wear Tchelet. As some of you may know, I know at least some of his sons do wear Tchelet, Rav Aaron's son, and you don't always follow everything. Rav Hershel Schachter, of course, wears Tchelet. He was Rav Hershel Schachter told us in Shir more than once. It's a little bit surprising. It's next week's parsha, 2 weeks parsha. Yishlach Lecha, that you're not allowed to wear tzitzis without Tchelet. It's better not to wear tzitzis. That was his opinion. I don't know if he still holds that, but he told us that more than once, because there's a debate in the Talmud whether you can let's say you have a mezuzah and you only have the shema in it. You don't have Vayam Shema. It's not a mezuzah. The mezuzah is invalid. So there's a debate it says in the Torah, when you have a 4-corner garment, you put on white strings and a blue string. So let's say you don't have the blue string. So that's a debate in the Mishnah. So there's the one opinion in the Mishnah, you don't wear tzitzis. You're not allowed to wear tzitzis because then you're wearing a 4-corner garment without tzitzis. You can't do that. So the Baal HaMaor of Zerachia Halevi printed in the back of every single Gemara, commentary on the Rif. So he never wore tzitzis in his life. Rav Soloveitchik went like, he never wore tzitzis in his life. He never wore tzitzis because he held that opinion that without tchelet, the lavan, the white doesn't count. The white has to be with the blue, like an Israeli flag, which is, I believe, where it actually comes from. The white and blue of the Israeli flag. I do think it's based on the tzitzis, like the 120 members in Knesset are based on Anshe Knesset Gdola. Those secular Zionists had a Jewish heart to them. So anyway, but the accepted opinion in Jewish law was that was not an issue, and you can wear sort of 8 strings of white, but Rav Schachter says that's only held if we can't get tchelet. Once we can get tchelet, so that's a problem of Baltigra. Then you have no excuse for wearing tzitzis. So no, I don't know anybody else who holds that view, but I do wear tchelet in my tzitzis, and yeah, of course I wear tchelet. I mean, it's very popular now. I'm very popular. It's more and more popular. I just got an email this week from Bar Sturman of the Ptil Tchelet Foundation, so they always like before Shlach Lecha to publicize stuff. Anyway, but what do I tell you? We're way off topic here, but based on how does our tradition work? Is it based on scientific knowledge? Can you do that? So Chazon Ish, Rav Soloveitchik felt, no, you have manuscripts. Rav Avadia Yosef felt, of course we use manuscripts. What do you mean? Oh, it was God's will that it should be missing? Well, it's God's will. We discovered it in the 20th century. And then we got access to the Vatican Library, and we got access to this and to that, and to hundreds, and the Cairo Geniza. The Cairo Geniza changed our understanding of Judaism, and therefore we have to change. So, and then how does it affect halakha? It's not a simple question, but I just point that out. But we've got these issues come up all the time. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back to the content of the Mishnah. So we discussed last week, we won't review, about getting paid, and we ended off that Rav Moshe Feinstein said in today's world, it's prohibited to teach Torah without getting paid. I don't think that means a lawyer who makes $200,000 a year or whatever, and he gives a shiur once a week in a shul should get paid. It means a person who's going to go into education. You want a professional teacher, you have to pay. And you have to pay well. As we ended with Rabbi Riskin, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So Baruch Hashem, teacher salaries have gone, I don't know in the States as much. I think they're better in Canada. I don't know exactly. I think it may depend on the schools, but now teachers can make a teacher in Toronto makes a six-figure, salary. The truth of the matter is not so much when the house is $2 million, but okay, this is not the time to discuss the day school education problem and how expensive it is to be an observant Jew. But if for normal people, a six-figure salary puts you in the top 5% of people in Canada. No, if you make about $220,000 in Canada, you're in the top 1%, probably higher in the United States. But anyways, so you have to pay properly. What is interesting is the Bartanura says this whole discussion is only by teachers, by people who teach Torah. A communal activist, someone who dedicates his life, he's not a teacher, works the head of the federation, I don't know, whatever you want, the head of the OU, whatever. So they have to be paid a lot of money. They have no restriction. There's no restriction. So that's always, there is a lot of tension. How much should a top administrator get paid? How much should this? Sometimes people get paid, people get upset sometimes. A member of parliament or a member, they're not paid so well actually, but sometimes somebody in a charitable organization is making $1 million a year. And again, I'm not here to pass any judgment what it should be, what it shouldn't be. So I think that irks people. I understand that. On the other hand, some of these people can raise $100 million. And if they worked in the private sector, they'd be making $5 million as a CEO of a company. So it's not, I just want to point out, it's not a simple equation. Even, you have to spend money to make money. And usually the head guy or man or woman is there because they're very good. And almost everybody who works in the public sector or for a charity could be making more money in the private sector, almost anybody. So again, but you shouldn't work in the public sector to make money. So I don't know where you draw the line. I don't know. All I'm saying is the Bartanura points out that people who are osek b'tzarchei tzibur should get paid well. That's all he said. More than they're worth. That's what he said. Now, I would say, why do you have to pay them well? So they don't have to worry about making a living. Because obviously, if you're worried about, making the mortgage payments, it's very hard to focus on all your efforts where they have to be. So we don't want money being consumed, but that's not what he says. I mean, maybe he also believes that, but that's not what he says. The reason he says is because people respect money. If a person's going to be a community leader, he's only going to have influence if he has money. That's a sad truth. That's what people honor. People respect certain things. So a person who has money, everybody knows that he's a big shot. He can say whatever he wants. They can do whatever they want. Maybe it's not good. No one's saying it's good or anything. It's just the reality. So he says it's important. It also takes, we pay for what we think is valuable. So if you don't pay, what do we think of our teachers? What do we think of our, our surgeons? What do we think of our baseball players? So, the fact that a baseball player makes $12 million a year, I mean, you all know this, tells us a lot about our society, and that a brain surgeon makes a lot less than a baseball player, even who's a lousy baseball player, is going to make more in the majors. A lousy player in the majors, makes in major leagues, is going to make more money than the top brain surgeon. Just the way of the world. Okay, people are interested to pay, whatever it is. Anyways, okay, that's just a point of money. It's whenever you talk about money, it's hard and difficult, and but it is a balance. And we'll end off. Let's remember that ideally, in the pristine world, Torah is taught for free, and Torah we engage in the community be'emunah. because we believe in it and we don't do it for financial reward. In the real world, people need to live, and it's a hard balancing act, and we'll see in the next Mishnah maybe something that could apply. Okay, I just want to spend, I didn't get a chance last week just to talk a little bit on Rabbi Tzadok, who said this. Rabbi Tzadok Omer. This is Rabbi Tzadok, which, by the way, it's an interesting name, and they've mentioned many times. Names are always ideas. In the Torah, we know 90% of the names are not real names. We discussed Shem wasn't his name. It's what the Torah calls them, right? Names are given, to reflect ideas often. It's not necessarily what their real name was. In the Talmud, there's probably less so. Probably a lot of them were real names, but a lot of them are nicknames. Abaye is a nickname. All kinds of, of names of terms of endearment. So Rabbi Tzadok come from the word of a tzaddik. Now, who was Rabbi Tzadok? Anyway, he doesn't appear so much. Anybody know who Rabbi Tzadok was? If you want to yell out, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat box. He's not. I don't think he's one of the more famous, although he is famous for one thing, I believe. Okay, I guess that means I'll have to answer the question. So Rabbi Tzadok is famous for fasting for 40 years before the temple was destroyed. It means like Ramadan, he ate at night. Now, obviously, clear. That's what now, again, it probably doesn't mean it literally. Marty Lecture was talking on Wednesday. I think it was him on Wednesday. We know numbers for sure, even more than names. Numbers are ideas. We read last week about the numbers, right? All the tribes, 603,550. That was my Dvar Torah actually that I sent out last week, I believe. So every number ends in 100. If it's any statisticians here, take 12 tribes and with ending 200, 400, what are the odds? Okay, you have one tribe, it's a 1 in 100. You have two tribes, it's 1 in 10,000. You have three tribes, it's 1 in a million. You have four tribes, it's 1 in 100 million. You have five tribes, it's 1 in 10 billion, I think. Do that, which the numbers are beyond astronomical. So clearly the Torah is rounding, that's no big deal. What's fascinating is the two tribes, one in Bamidbar and one in Pinchas, that are rounded off to 50 and 30. In Parsha Bamidbar, we read last week, God has only 50 people. So that's why there's 603,550 males between 20 and 60. And in Pinchas, the tribe of Reuven has 30 people. That's why there's 601,730 people between 20 and 60 males. And right away, what jumps out to you, this is what I wrote last week, this is what jumps out at you. Reuven and Gad. Who are Reuven and Gad? Oh, Reuven and Gad were the two tribes that didn't want to go to the land of Israel. So those are the two tribes that don't have a complete number, don't round up to 100. There's something missing in the tribe. That's the Torah's brilliant way of getting this idea across, right? So numbers are always ideas. So we all know 7. Everybody knows the number 7. 10, the fifth parak in Pirkei Avot, where we get there's all about numbers. 10, 7, 4, 3. It's all about numbers. Numbers are always ideas. 10, Aseret Hadibrot, Aseret Ma'amarot Nivra Olam. 13, the 13 attributes of God. The 13 midot, how to interpret the Torah, because interpreting the Torah is who God is. So the number 13. 40 is a transformation number, right? Rabbi Liebtag, I guess it was Rabbi Liebtag was talking about that. 40 is a transformation number. 40 days of the flood, 40 days Har Sinai, 40 years in the desert, 400 years in Egypt.
It was
400. I'm sorry?
It was Moshe Sokolov.
Oh, Moshe Sokolov. Okay, I go to so many, shiurim, I can't remember who says what, but I this idea before we've discussed. Thank you very much. So 40 is, so when say he fasted for 40 years, it doesn't mean he fasted for 40 years. It means he fasted a long time. Maybe he fasted 43 years. I don't know. But anyways, the Mishnah says he fasted for 40 years to avert the destruction of the temple. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, so everybody knows when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, unfortunately, the next holidays are Shiva Sever Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Now that we're past Shavuot, the summer, the 3 weeks. So when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was given the story in the Gemara, whether it's literal or not, he meets the Vespasian, Shalom Alecha, welcome, Caesar, and then the messenger comes and he's the Caesar, and he gives Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai whatever wish he wants. And of course, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai does not ask to save Yerushalayim. We've spoken about that.
Yeah.
We give up Yerushalayim he saw it was useless. Who needs a temple? Fighting in the people is all useless. So he didn't ask for Yerushalayim. The Romans can have Yerushalayim. We got to restart in Yavne. So that's the famous one he did. But he also had two other requests that are less famous. One is to keep the family of Rabban Gamliel alive. The Nisi'im, the heads were Rabban Gamliel, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda Hanas. Rabban Gamliel is the son of Hillel, the famous Hillel and Shammai. That's Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. It's a debate in the scholars, was that his son or his grandson? Doesn't, for our purposes, it doesn't really matter. He was a descendant of Hillel, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, 6 generations later, is a further descent. You got the Nisim are Hillel, Rabban Gamliel, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel of Yavne. That's the famous one, all the fights in Yavne. Then Rav Shimon ben Gamliel up north, the second one, and then Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So it's son after son after son. So he asked that they save the family of Rabban Gamliel, the leaders, and then he asked for a doctor for Rabbi Tzadok, because Rabbi Tzadok had fasted for 40 years. So he needs a doctor. That's what the Gemara says. That's sort of a funny thing. And Rav Soloveitchik beautifully points out that great leaders, often great leaders only see the big picture. They forget about the small little thing. It's important to worry about the sick man as it is to save the entire Jewish people, right? One person is an entire world. So he wasn't just, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wasn't just concerned with the future of the Jewish people and setting up an academy in Yavne. He was concerned with Rav Tzadok, and he was concerned with It's a beautiful idea. The big and the small have to go together. So that's Rabbi Tzadok. So when Rabbi Tzadok tells you don't take money for Torah, you know where it's coming from. It's coming from somebody who lived, who put his heart and soul into his concern for the Jewish people, hoping to avert. Now, what I found fascinating, I looked up all the places Rabbi Tzadok appears in the Mishnah. He appears about 7 or 8 times in the Mishnah, not too many. I mean, but in every single case except for one, he's lenient. I just found that, you would think a guy who fasts for 40 years is okay, he does every crazy stricture in the book. No, the more famous one, some of you may have learned, if you learned in Masechet Sukkah. So how much can you eat outside of a sukkah? So the Gemara tells a story. They brought a little sandwich to Rabban Gamliel. I think it was Rabban Gamliel. And Rabban Gamliel said, let's go eat in the sukkah. And they brought it to Rav Tzadok. Rav Tzadok said, sure, let's eat it here. He didn't he didn't wash because it was a small piece of bread. He didn't care about eating the sukkah. And he didn't do Birkat HaMazon. That's what the Gemara says. You don't have to. You only have to V'achalta Savata, only if you're satiated. Okay, so the rabbis say even if you just eat a smaller amount. But so Rav Tzadok didn't. He fasted, but he didn't care about eating. Not that he didn't care, but he was willing to eat in a sukkah, outside of a sukkah, those things you wouldn't. You can. He quoted in the Mishnah in Eidiot about all these debates about kosher food or what makes you tahor or tamei. He says. He's always lenient. For example, the brine of a non-kosher grasshopper, he says you're allowed to eat. You just can't eat the grasshopper, but the liquid that comes from it, you can eat. He also is the one when the Gemara says that the whole debate if you can roast a Korban Pesach, especially in the generation after the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, people shouldn't feel like you're bringing the Korban Pesach. And Rabbi Tzadok said, no, of course we roast the Korban Pesach. And then when they talk about a reason not to keep a vow, if I would have realized it would upset this, it would upset that. So they said, okay, so the Mishnah says, if it would make your parents very upset, if you would have realized the pain you caused your parent, that's an excuse. So Rabbi Tzadok says, if you would have realized God would get upset, then you can annul the vow. God doesn't like people taking vows. So they said to Rabbi Tzadok, then you don't have any vows. That's true about every vow. In other words, my point being that Rabbi Tzadok, even though he fasted for 40 years and is a tzaddik, that doesn't mean that he's strict in Jewish law. We know, and generally, koach tehatera adif. That's a whole other discussion. It's better to be lenient in halacha. We live in a generation today where many people like to be strict. The Mishnah Berurah has a lot to do with that. whatever. It's not a joke when they say that the Mishnah Berurah, you don't want a tzaddik writing a halacha book. The Mishnah Berurah was such a tzaddik that he was afraid, one opinion here. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah does. It says here, you know what? It's better to be strict. And the Mishnah Berurah became so influential. That's not it's what some of the scholars point out. But the Aruch HaShulchan, for example, is well known. The Aruch HaShulchan was 9 years older than the Mishnah Berurah. That's Chaim Soloveitchik's famous article. The difference between the Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah. The Aruch HaShulchan was a more traditional ruler of Jewish law. In other words, he would say, he first of all very much would justify practices of the people, even when the practices are hard to justify. That was the traditional approach of the Balei HaTosafot. You always try to justify the practices of observant Jews, even if they're questionable practices. Aruch HaShulchan was much more lenient. He didn't care this, and I think didn't care, but his style of psak, the traditional style of psak, and it's well known. And until recently, Rav Henkin, for example, he was Rav Eliyahu Yosef Henkin. But many people, the assumption was the Mishnah Berurah was only meant for people learning in yeshivot, and the average person should use the Aruch HaShulchan. I don't know if that's like true anymore. I don't think people say that, but many, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky apparently said that. I know for a fact Rav Henkin said it. Many of the great people said that the Aruch HaShulchan, that was the more traditional approach to psak. The approach of the Mishnah Berurah is much more, I'm nervous, I don't want to make a mistake, and therefore I'm going to worry about every second opinion. Okay, I'm not here to whatever say, but I just point out that Rav Tzadok clearly had that other approach. Okay, let's move on and to the next Mishnah. Okay, any questions? Okay, Rabbi Yossi Omer.
Question.
Oh, question, sure, yes.
Yes. Are you at some stage going to talk about Al Tifrosh Min HaTzibur?
No, I'm not going to talk about that. It's not in the Mishnah. It's only in the Siddur.
Oh.
So if I give a shir on I used to give a shir in pre-COVID. I gave a shir every Shabbos afternoon before Mincha. So then I could, wasn't always on Pirkei Avot, but I did do 1 year on Pirkei Avot. So then I'll talk about it. But I did talk about it last year. I can send you the recording because it's Hillel. He's born. Al Tifrosh Min HaTzibur is not Rabbi Tzadok. It also tells you it's probably not him. See, if you look in the Mishnah here, see, that's probably how it happened. The Mishnah says, don't make the Torah a crown or a spade. Yes. And that's what Hillel said. Now, this is the only place in Pirkei Avot where one rabbi quotes another rabbi. The entire Talmud is one rabbi quoting another rabbi. You can't do a page of Talmud where this rabbi does, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav. Like every page of Talmud, because it's, as Rav Soloveitchik, it's our Masorah. What makes the teachings so important often is the authority. They come down 3-4 generations. So every single statement in the Gemara, almost, except the originators, it's always somebody quoting somebody. And you look at any page in the Gemara, there's 100 times it comes up. Never in Pirkei Avot, except this one time. Sometimes you have two rabbis who say similar things, but they're not quoting each other. This is the only time in the Mishnah it says, I don't know. I guess Rabbi Tzadok was such a tzaddik, he didn't think his own words were so. I don't know. Maybe he felt he was very humble. This is a total speculation. Why in this case and only in this case? And Hillel said, "The one who uses the crown of Torah, he'll be destroyed. He'll be wiped out. It's a terrible thing to use money." So the editors of the Siddur then quoted with another statement of Hillel, but they don't say the name of Hillel. Al Tifrosh Min HaTzibur, that's Hillel. So it could be that's how it came about, because we already have Rabbi Tzadok quoting Hillel in the Mishnah, but he says he's quoting Hillel. So when they edited, maybe they added in a line from Hillel, Al Tifrosh Min HaTzibur at the beginning. So, but we did speak about that last year when we get there. But the important thing is be part of a community, and we can't separate. And the community, I don't know if I said this last year, at Sadiq, at Tzibur means that Saber is to gather together. That's what the word means, Sibur. So, but they say cute, Tzadik Bein Reish, Tzadik Bein in Russia. You have to be part of a community consists of righteous people, of average people, and less than average people, right? That's anyway. So we'll have to pick up on that more. But let's go on to Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, Merkolam Achaved the Torah. whoever honors the Torah, gufa mechubad al habriyot. His body will be honored. People, humanity will honor him. Interesting. Kol mechalel et Torah, gufo mechalel al habriyot. And those who desecrate Torah, who don't honor Torah, they will be desecrated or looked down upon, or whatever. However you want to translate the word, mechulal al habriyot. So first of all, the Tiferet just shows what's the connection. So it's really it was a big deal in the time of the Mishnah. So the connection is what's kavod Torah is to work for a living, right? Rabbi Tzadok just said, don't make the Torah as a means of a livelihood. Don't use Torah for personal gain. So the next Mishnah is kol mechaved Torah. How do you honor Torah? Even if you do menial work. And he says you can't say, the Gemara has an expression, Kabod habriyot dochelot aseh shebetorah, that for human dignity, we can sometimes violate even laws of the Torah. That's, to give a very coarse example, that's what the Gemara used sometimes. Someone who was in the washroom and he doesn't have a way to wipe themselves. They can even do whatever they have to do to be cleanliness. But there are all kinds of other examples that Kavod hatzibur, Kvod habriyot, the dignity of humanity. Briyot doesn't mean what human beings considered undignified. You can often violate laws of the Torah, for sure, rabbinic laws. And so he says, don't say, a Torah scholar shouldn't say it's a violation of my human dignity to be a garbage collector. The Gemara gives us an example. You should flee carcasses in the marketplace. That was very demeaning work. Go in the middle of the shuk where everybody can see you. The guy who knows Shas backwards and forwards, but he's poor. Nebuch, he's poor. What can you do? Unfortunately. So he has to make a living. So rather than asking people for a handout, he should go in the middle of the marketplace and flee the skins off the animals. It's a very demeaning work. Dekmar says, Havshet, you should flee the carcasses and I'll teach the rekla briot, don't take money. So that's how the Tiferet Yisrael explains the connection of the Mishnah. Kavod HaTorah is to do whatever you have to do to make your own living and not to be dependent on Torah. Again, today, that Kavod Torah can imply being a teacher getting paid, but it means don't rely on charity. A teacher, or at least they're working for a living. Somebody, we're not going to discuss it. We mentioned before, that's the problem. Learning in Kollel is learning in Kollel aloud. And obviously, the Rambam says you lose your share in the world to come. Now, I'm not, okay, we understood that after World War II, it's very necessary. Okay, yeah, every field has people in Kollel. That's what we call an oncologist who spends their whole life in a laboratory doing, research. It's very important. They'll discover a cure for cancer, please God. So we have to pay the money. What are they doing? They're sitting and learning and doing research, experiment. So that, of course, we can have that in Torah too. But not everybody becomes an oncologist who can sit in a lab all day. You got to get a 99.8 in biology and chemistry and physics and get into medical school. And you got to be towards the top of your class and, do an internship and a fellowship and, residency first. So yes, that's what Rav Shechter always used to say. And apparently he told the story with the Ponevezher Rav Kahneman, who founded Ponevezh, when they came to complain that they're not getting paid enough, and Kollel said, I'll double your salary tomorrow, but you have to take a test. You have to get over 90. You have to pass the test. And they said, no. I know you throw them out. That's a pretty scary idea. But yes, Rav Shechter always used to say we should get rid of 95% of people in the Kollel and pay the remaining 5% 20 times as much money, so they can really make contributions during life. But just to sit and learn, that's take charity, that's a problem even today. But yes, for research purposes, obviously we have to pay certain people. But anyways, that's what Rosie's saying, is a person who wants to get charity, that's a chilul habriot. So that's how he explains the connection between the two Mishnayot. However, there are other interesting explanations that he says. So then he says, beautiful explanation. You know what Kavod Torah is? I don't know. Maybe you can see the books here. Books should be bound nicely, and a Jewish book should look nice. It should look nice, like it's not. You buy a fancy textbook, right? I think it was Nassim Sherman, the founder of Art Scroll, the long-term editor of Art Scroll, who said anybody who said don't judge a book by its cover wasn't in the publishing business. That's very nice, but we all judge a book by its cover. That's what we do. That's so a book has to look nice, has to be bound properly, not the pages are falling out. It should, on the other hand, you want the books to look used. You want to like somebody actually reads them. But that's a fascinating things that you should honor the books. I remember many years ago, Rabbi Emanuel Feldman should live and be well. I believe he's living in Israel. He must be pushing 90. I don't exactly know how old he is. He was the rabbi in Atlanta for many, many years. He went from Ner Yisrael in Baltimore as a young, 23, 24-year-old to Atlanta, which was a total desert. And he built up Torah in Atlanta. And he was the long-term editor of Tradition. And he used to write these beautiful articles. It'd be his editor's notes in every edition. He wrote about often baseball. He would write about all kinds of cute things, always very, very, powerful. So he once had an article, tefillin in a brown paper bag. And the idea is nobody would walk around with their tefillin in a brown paper bag. We understand that you have to honor the tefillin, and we put it in a nice, a nice talis bag, whatever. My sister made me a nice talis bag that I use, on Shabbos. She's here, so it has to be nice and crocheted and all the fancy things. And he was complaining about how the lack of oratorical skills that so many rabbis have. As I once I remember being in shul once, and obviously I'm not going to mention who it was and where it was, and the person sitting next to me after the rabbi spoke said, that rabbi can't speak 3 languages well. Now there are 3 languages. He doesn't know English, Yiddish, or Hebrew. Like because they speak in English. You know how they give it Russian. It's half English, half Yiddish and Hebrew and English. Said no, you have to speak with Norman Lamb was just his yahrzeit this week. I think YU had a thing. I didn't see it, but and they're putting out in Tradition. Actually, Tradition magazine is putting out this summer a 350-page hard volume of all in honor and memory of Dr. Lamb articles. I think Tradition, you can't buy it. It's only, I don't know how many people have even heard of it. That was the magazine of the RCA, Rabbinical Council of America, that goes to all Rabbinical Council of America members. Many of their stuff is online. I don't know. I don't know if anybody can access them, or you need to be a member of the RCA. I'm not sure, but they have lots of it. Regarded today, perhaps it's maybe not as influential as it once was, although Jeffrey Sachs in Israel became the recent editor, and he's really put a lot of effort into making it more substantive, whatever. So they're putting out a whole thing in Norman Lamb. So when Norman Lamb got up to speak, that was Kavod HaTorah. When Rabbi Riskin speaks, it's when Jonathan Sachs spoke. That's Kavod HaTorah. When a rabbi gets up and he can't put together a thought, and especially if they're non-observant Jews, that's almost a Chilul Hashem. So that's what he was complaining about. Fill in a brown paper bag. We have to understand how we package Torah is very important.
Yes.
The Torah was concerned about how we package Torah, so to speak. So that's a whole other approach to Kavod Torah, not about taking money necessarily, but of course about basic honor, the way we treat books, the way we speeches, the way, how much a rabbi prepares for a shiur, like all the things. Whenever somebody is representing Torah, they have to realize they're representing Torah and how they're going to present themselves. We mentioned before that I don't know so much oratorical like rhetoric skills, but oratory skills, clarity was very important. We spoke about that just last week, or no, maybe it was a few weeks ago. Rav, when he got smicha, went to a farm. I'm sorry, I said he went to a farm for 18 months, right? That's what I learned before. But the Gemara says, maybe I didn't speak about this, that one of the requirements to get smicha is to be a clear speaker. You're teaching Torah.
Oh.
So everybody knows, everybody has been to university, had these brilliant professors who couldn't teach for the life of them. Today, I think there's more of a recognition in the university world. I think that the people who are professors have to be able to clearly teach. But the Gemara is very clear. The Gemara is very clear that in order to get smicha, you have to take speech. Yeshiva University to graduate college, I don't know what it's like. I went there many years ago. There was a speech requirement. You had to take a course, a college credited course, 1 semester, 3 credits as it works in the States. For those who are in Canada, that would be like half a semester, like at U of T or York. And you have to take a speech. And I remember we had to give 4 speeches. We had to give a persuasive speech, and this you had to research, and you were judged on rhetoric, and people today make fun of that, and I think it's a skill that is really lacking. I think how many rabbis do I want to go hear them speak? I don't say that it's hard to be a good speaker, like to be an inspiring speaker on a Shabbos morning, but it's okay, at least have a message. You don't have to be very few people can be Norman Lamb or Jonathan Sachs. That takes a special God-given talent, but it's not going to give talent. I hope I can say this. I hope what I'm going to say now is not I think it's very complimentary, but I hope you'll agree with me. My cousin, who's a member in the Jewish Center for many, many years in New York, 86th Street, where Norman Lamb was the rabbi. And then where Ari Berman, who's now the president of Yeshiva University, was also the rabbi before he made Aliyah. And J.J. Schechter was the rabbi there for many years. So J.J. Schechter came to the Jewish Center. He was like 30 years old. And my cousin told me he was really a lousy speaker. He was not a good orator. And the people in the shul recognize he's an extremely talented person. He's a wonderful rabbi, many talents. I'm sure his content was fine, but his oratory wasn't good. So the shul went to him and they paid for him to take classes in speech lesson. And I think you all know, J.J. Schechter today is considered one of the great speakers. So you can hone, you have to have some God-given talents, but you can hone them. So I remember my cousin told me the story many years ago, and it was a fascinating story. So when he came, I don't know, everybody has their own memory, what's a good speaker, what's not a good speaker, but the point is, that's also a great shul, that instead of saying, the rabbi's no good, they're going to work with the rabbi to correct his faults. But it is important. This is part of Kavod HaTorah. Anyway, how the rabbi speaks, how your books look, how you write, what English you use. If you're writing in English, write in proper English. My mother used to yell at me all the time because I did pick up some of the bad yeshivish lingo. You learn out. My mother would yell at me. Every saying, what do you mean you learn out? You derive. You don't learn out. In yeshivish talk, there's all these expressions that are not proper English. So maybe in yeshiva you can use them, maybe. But when you get into the real world, that's not how people talk. Anyway, so that's one thing. Now, the Gemara, and he says, then you have the other level, both the Bartanura quotes it, Tiferet Yisrael, you have to stand for tolerance, for Kavod HaTorah, to honor people honor a Sefer Torah, but more importantly, to honor Torah scholars. Those who are Torah scholars must be honored. The Gemara in Makot has an amazing expression. I always like, we always put things in perspective. We so often have our perspectives mixed up. So the Gemara in Makot says, Kame tipshe inshe. It's a beautiful expression. How foolish, tipesh inshe. How foolish people are. People are so stupid. Why are people so foolish? Because whenever a Sefer Torah, you ever be in shul and somebody's sitting talking and somebody walks in to take a Sefer Torah to another minyan, or they open up their and they jump up, like in a quarter of a second, they jump out of their seats because they can't be sitting down when the Sefer Torah is in the shul. It says when the Sefer Torah moves, people stand up through sec. When a Talmid Chacham walks into the room, they sit down. They don't really, they know, who cares. And the Gemara is, of course, saying, a Sefer Torah, it's parchment, it's black on white, black ink on white parchment. Okay, it's very nice, very nice. But a real Sefer Torah is a living Sefer Torah, the person who has Torah inside them. So that's what Gemara say, Kamek Tipshe, how foolish are people? They give more respect to a book than they give to a living book. So that's also a beautiful expression. I always like to say, Rav Schechter always used to say this, that everybody knows that, a person dies. Oh my God, what a tzaddik he was. You go to a funeral, sometimes you don't recognize who they're talking about. That. I mean, I hope not, but y'all know what I mean. So of course it's nice. We want to point out the nice things. Obviously, you're not gonna. That's fine. We are marketing, but whatever honor we give to a dead person, you have to give 100 times to a living person. In other words, whether we honor people so much, even when they're dead, we give them a little bit of honor. Now we know, halachically speaking, you can talk lashon hara about a person who is dead. Mitzvot bein adam lechaviro do not apply when a person isn't alive anymore. So the Mishnah Berurah quotes, the Gemara says it's not a nice thing to do. Well, why do you want to talk lashon hara about a dead person? That's not nice, but it's technically allowed. That's the, I want to use the word heter. I think it's more than that, because it's probably true even while they're alive. But that's, you can do historical research, and you do historical research, and you write about people, and you write about their faults. Maybe they did something wrong that led to X, Y, and Z. So how are we going to learn from that? So that serves, even if it would be lashon hara, it's probably allowed. But when a person is dead, you have to give them a little bit of honor. So you got to go to their funeral, say nice things in eulogy, respect them. Of course, I don't mean to minimize that. I want to maximize the amount of honor we have to give to a living person. It's much easier. It's much easier to give honor to if they don't talk back, the person who's alive. It's the same reason it's so much easier to keep mitzvot between man and God and man and man. God doesn't, you don't know, who knows where God is. So it's easy to keep Shabbos, kashrut, that's easy stuff. But not to insult people and not to cheat, that's the hard stuff when they're dealing with actual people. But anyway, so that's what the Gemara says. How silly people are, because they stand for a Sefer Torah, but they don't stand. Then he adds another explanation, which is, I guess I should have really said it before, in the tefillin and brown paper bag, that a Talmid Chacham has to have gufo ubigadav nikiim. His body and clothes have to be clean. The Gemara says that a Talmid Chacham who walks out with a stain on his clothes, that's a chilul Hashem. By the way, that's the Hasidic dress. Where do you think the Hasidic? We all know the Hasidic dress comes from the Polish nobility. We want to dress fancy. So, okay, maybe today it looks not so fancy. Whatever it is, fine, beseder. But so they quote that Kavod HaTorah is how you speak and how you interact with people, of course. And he's dignified. He wears a tuxedo, tails, top hat, and talking on the Jewish Center. My brother was the first assistant rabbi at the Jewish Center in the early 1990s when J.J. Schechter had just started. So you'll read, he was reading the Constitution of the Jewish Center. So first of all, they used to have a rule: you can't shuckle. No shuckling, because that's undignified. Or people. We all know this. I mean, how should I say it? That was the difference between a Reform shul and an Orthodox shul, right? It's, dignity and decorum. So we think that's Reform. It's not Reform. It's just whatever. But so you weren't chuckle. And of course, until recently, rabbi had to wear a top hat. And there were tails to dignity. The rabbi and the chazan, I'm sure Eve is sort of, shaking her head. Yeah, rabbi wears a top hat. I mean, clerical robes was a big discussion in Europe, right? In the yeshivish world, the Hungarian world, if you wore clerical robes, that shul was out of bounds. That was non-Orthodox shul. And Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, of course, had clerical robes. I'm talking about. The rabbi wears these long, clerical robes, that's what they called them. So today, if an Orthodox rabbi would, I don't even think the conservative Reform rabbis, any of them wear it anymore. But can you imagine an Orthodox rabbi coming to shul with long clerical, shul with, I don't know what they do to him, but whatever. So I agree. What constitutes clean clothing can change from generation to generation, but it means that a Talmid Chacham has to be dressed appropriately, and everybody knows that's not necessary. The thing they most teach in the yeshiva. By the way, in Slobodka, it's well known, the famous Musar yeshiva Yaakov Kamenetsky went, etc. So in Slobodka, they were very into that. By the way, that was the reason that a yeshiva boy wasn't allowed to grow a beard. I don't know if people know that. No, you look at any picture from pre-war yeshiva, nobody had a beard. A beard, only the Roshi yeshivas were entitled to have a beard. A beard was considered arrogant to grow a beard if you weren't good. Look at all the pictures from the 30s, the 20s, 100 years ago. Nobody had a beard in yeshivas, but in Slobodka, they very much emphasized proper dress and all these things. That's what the Musar yeshivas were like, to develop our character, not just learning. Learning has to be done in a whole proper idea. And then the Bartenura adds one more thing, and that is Doresh Chaserot v'Yaterot. So this is also beautiful and very much today. What's Kavod Torah? You take the Torah seriously. So you look every extra word, which is today sort of the new style of Tanakh from Herzog College, Yeshiva Kusha, Haretz Yon. The analysis, the literary analysis of the text, every extra word, that's Kavod. Right? You study Shakespeare, lahavdil, every nuance in Shakespeare, people don't study. This year, chat's not even doing, Shakespeare because of it's a COVID issue. They had to cut back because of COVID, so they cut out Shakespeare. So my kid's not learning like Shakespeare. I don't know. It's I'm old fashioned. I mean, I still had to remember. I had to memorize Hamlet and and whatever, half of Hamlet and and Julius Caesar. Okay, whatever. Okay, and Beseder. So they don't learn Shakespeare. I don't know. But so you study every word carefully. So you have to do Kavod Torah is the Chaserot and the Yaterot. That's how the Bartenura says. You study it and give reasons for every kutz v'kutz. You don't just what's the Torah. You have to give reasons to understand what the Torah is talking about. And of course, the most simple explanation of Kavod HaTorah is you keep the Torah. You keep the mitzvot of the Torah, which of course is remember, we're continuing on last week's Mishnah. The key is to learn, is to do it. So the same way we started, Kavod HaTorah maybe is not to take money. The Kavod HaTorah is to work for a living, not to use Torah as a way to get, I learned Torah, I'll take money for that. But it's also a way that I keep the Torah. That's learning for the sake of doing. So that's what Rav Yossi says, the importance of learning Torah. Please God, we'll discuss a little bit Rav Yossi next week. We'll continue. Just let's do very, very quick review, and then we'll take in any questions that we have. So we discuss sometimes the difference between what's in the Mishnah and the Siddur, and the whole problem of manuscripts and corrupted text, and what our attitude should be. Chores, and we finished up some of the things about taking money, how communal leaders for teaching Torah is one thing. We had the balance between the prohibition and the need for taking Torah, but that's really for teaching Torah. People who have positions of communal leadership, there it's a little bit more important, because if you want them to lead, they have to be respected by the community. And sadly, perhaps, or whatever, people respect. I mean, it's not a bad thing. Having wealth is a good thing, used properly, but that's the measure of respect. So they have to be paid well. Mentioned that. And then we talked about. We talked Rav Tzadok, who Rav Tzadok was, and the leniencies go together with being a tzaddik, fasting for 40 years. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, the big and the small, worrying about the big and the small. And then we talked a little bit on Kavod HaTorah, different aspects, and it's okay. We're working with dignity, dressing with dignity, speaking with dignity. All these things are very, very important. It's not just important, the Torah itself, it's how we market it and how we position it. And those who study and know Torah are in many ways that they have to give it more honor than Torah itself. Okay, there's much more to discuss, but please God, next week. Let me just see if there are any questions here on the chat box, if anyone wants to ask. Art Scroll Mishnah Series, first edition, 2016, impression, Hebrew English with Yad Avram and footnotes. Okay, what I point out, but it is different, I assume. The concept of the manuscript is hinted to in Yirmiyahu Beit Hayotzer. Okay, I'm not so familiar, right? I mean, Yirmiyahu does talk about writing down things, but I know you have to familiar yourself. We may actually. Okay, I'll have to take a look. We a little surprised, a little secret. We please God, Simi Peters will be starting a series in the next couple of weeks, and probably on Sefer Yirmiyahu. We're still playing around with the title. Let me know if you're interested in that, to have a series on Sefer Yirmiyahu or not. But whatever, we're still okay. I totally agree the beauty of the book itself. The book is a work of art. Yes, just consider magnificent illustrated manuscripts. Absolutely. The Pesach Haggadot, and it is, when we say, what we call it, a coffee table book or something, that's there's something to be said for that. Oh, everybody can subscribe at Tradition. Okay, thank you, Nathan. Yes, they have many, many wonderful articles. And if you want to see the history of American Judaism, read the Tradition articles in the 60s. Debate that's I remember that's where they have on Masada, was that good? It was committing suicide. Was that a horrific sin? And that's where they have lots of fascinating articles and great names from the past, because Tradition was founded by Norman Lamb in 1959, I believe. So he was 32 years old. Rambam was born in 1927, so he was 32 years old. He was the original editor for the first 2-3 years, and then Walter Wurzburger, Alav Shalom, who also served as rabbi here in John's course. Wurzburger was the rabbi, was editor for many years, and then I don't know if there was something between him and Emmanuel Feldman, and Shalom Karmi was the editor for a while, and now it's Jeffrey Sachs. It's the first time they have an editor who lives in Israel. Okay, yeah, except for the two most recent issues. Yeah, I recommend it. Thank you. Okay, to the Rabban Mishneh time, student wearing a head covering like their teachers was considered haughty. Yeah, I think I mentioned to you that in Shimshon Raphael Hirsch's shul in Frankfurt, only the rabbi could put their tallis over their head. You know, there is an issue putting your tallis. Who is he to put, like, you know, who's he to think he's a nobody, right? You put your tallis over your head because I'm modesty, you know, that God above me. That was considered not appropriate for the average person. Today, so in Germany, only the rabbi is different. So Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was allowed to put a tallis over his head, but nobody in the shul was allowed to. I don't know what it's like today in Breuer's, but I would be shocked if that's still the norm. I'm imagining in Breuer's today, everybody puts their tallis head, but I don't really know. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we wish everybody well. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Mr. Zucker, if you have any questions to get me working for next week. And
No, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
This Sunday morning, I'm sorry, yeah, okay, we'll start in a second. This Sunday morning, Daniel Feldman will wrap up his series on halacha and human relations at 10 a.m. Sunday, Rabbi Liebtag will begin a week Sunday, a new series. We have a number of series coming up, keep posted, but otherwise we'll have, and Monday, of course, the continuing series of Ari Shvat on religious Zionism, and Mark Shapiro finishing up probably just 2 or 3 more lectures on his book, his fast. He's been talking now, I think we've had 48 classes on his most recent book, all the letters. He probably needs 3 more classes, and then he's going to start a series on Shaul Lieberman. Back where we started, Mark was giving great rabbinic leaders and the gamut all over the place. Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Staver, Moshe Pinty, Soloveitchik, Rabbi Lettinger. I mean, the range is really phenomenal. But with COVID, he couldn't do any research. So really, and so he didn't have his library access. So he said, okay, I'll talk about the book for a few weeks, and a few weeks has turned into 48 weeks, and still going. Anyways, will be Monday. And so this week there won't be any classes on Tuesday, but next Tuesday we'll be starting up a new series. Then Wednesday we'll have Marty Lection of Torah. Thursday we'll start have the Parsha Friday. So anyways, keep posted, look at the emails, invite your friends, and everybody have a wonderful Shabbos. Be well, be safe, and thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Any questions? Yeah, Zev, you want to ask something, or?
I just
wondered why you said Z.
When did I say Z? Oh, when did I say Z? I didn't even notice.
You said X and Z.
I'm sorry?
When you were saying like X, Y, and Z, I'm wondering why you're saying
that was
Z.
a mistake. I'm not following the Kavod HaTorah. Of course, being a Canadian, it's supposed to be Z. But I guess I spent too many years in the States. You know, I went to, so XYZ actually sounds better than XYZ. It has a better ring, but I'm sorry. Thank you for that. Correct. Okay. Yeah, Z and Z, the different with the put that U and honor and color, you know, the Canadian spelling. I always correct, you know, the American spelling, Canadian spelling. Okay. In English, we are the British English, you know. Anyways, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Be well. Yeah.
Rabbi Kelman,
Yes. Yes.
Meir Soloveitchik wears a robe,
Oh, really?
a clerical robe.
Wow. But you know what? The Sephardic shul, the Spanish Portuguese shul, that doesn't shock me thinking about it. I think it's beautiful. I think listen, I grew up, my father was a rabbi in a big shul. It was a traditional, very, very traditional conservative shul. You know, that was the era. And you know, not at the end, but you know, as I was a kid, he wore clerical robes, of course. And we had a chazan and a choir. I mean, think about it. Davening on Shabbos morning took over 3 hours, usually around 3¼ hours. But there was a choir and a chazan, world famous chazanim. And I mean, it's people today can't tolerate that stuff. You know, it's but I would like that once a month on Shabbos. I would love. There's not one Orthodox shul in Toronto has a chazan. I don't believe. Hope if you're still here, no. She went to wrong. I don't think we used to have Toronto used to be a very famous city. Some of the world famous chazanim were in Toronto. Johannesburg and Toronto had the very famous South Africa. And today it's so out of style. And my wife and myself, we like chazanu once in a while, and they'll go to hear a chazan. It's not beautiful, but people today don't go for that stuff. But that's very interesting. Mayor Salvation,
all of the, the
all
chazan
the clergy at Spanish Portuguese. Wow.
and the hat, the whole thing.
Yeah. I davened there once in my life on a Friday night. I mean, I don't live in New York, and I mean, I'm in the city, but I did once daven there. Joel Finkelstein at the time was the associate rabbi. Joel Finkelstein and I, we were in YU together, if you know him. He's been in Memphis now for many years.
Right.
So I remember, and he would tell us all the stories about the shul because he's not Sephardic.
Meir is Mayor Soloveitchik.
I know that. That's why I was kind of shocked when he took job. And he does whatever. I don't want. Mayor Soloveitchik strikes me more as the intellectual type, and he's a wonderful speaker, by the way.
Yes.
Talking about people you want to go hear speak, Mayor Soloveitchik. I don't know who. Maybe I'm sorry.
Definitely, yes.
He's a phenomenal speaker. He is a phenomenal speaker. Listen, it's hard, but you know what? The phenomenal speakers work on it. Don't kid yourself. Don't think Jonathan Sachs didn't work hard. It's hard work, and they practice. And Rabbi Luchstein, I remember with the little homiletics I took in YU, I imagine he said we had to take a homiletics course. This in a speech undergraduate, and Rabbi Luchstein taught the course. And they talked about some of the things they would make. They would make the write out every word and practice in front of a mirror and listen to it. I mean, if you want to really become a great speaker, you have to really work on it. And it's hard, and people don't feel it's important. But yeah, that's very interesting. The clerical robes. Yes, Naomi.
I think I was in Heichal Shlomo in Yerushalayim a number of years ago, and I think the Chazan there wore robes also.
Yeah. So when the great synagogue, Hirschtick used to be the chazan, the father, the sons in the Hamptons. I remember we were in sabbatical. I'm pretty sure my parents were on sabbatical when I was in the Grus Kollel, and in YU. I remember my mother would go like every week to the great synagogue just to hear the kids sing En Kelohenu. The beautiful voice. I mean, up in the end of davening. But I went when I was in Israel. Not long. I went there. I didn't like the choir. They didn't sing such whatever. It was too. I don't know. I wasn't so into it so much. But you have in Israel if you chazan. But I know in New York, the big Manhattan shuls have them. No, a little bit, sort of chazan. And what's his name? The Jewish Center has a chazan or not? No, I don't even know. Do you know? Teaneck, have any chazanim in Teaneck? I don't think so. Are you also in Teaneck?
Yeah,
Naomi, you're also in Teaneck?
I'm in Greater Teaneck, yes.
So Rabbi Strachler from Toronto, from Sher Shemaim Toronto, coming to Rinat. That's a big move. I was kind of wow. That's like that's very interesting.
Yeah, I live in Bergenfield, so it's.
Oh, so yeah, what shul do you go to? My sister
Beth Abraham.
Oh, sure. Rabbi Neuberger.
Rabbi Neuberger, yes, from Toronto.
3 blocks from where I'm sitting, Rabbi Neuberger. Maybe 5 blocks from where I'm sitting.
The West Side shuls have chazanim.
The West Side shul is right. Okay.
Lincoln Square has WS.
Right. Lincoln Square has a chazan. Right.
I believe Jewish Center does too.
And Fifth Avenue, of course, has obviously, and but in
Park East has,
Okay. Who's at Park East?
You know?
I don't know. Who's the rabbi in Park East Synagogue?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, everybody go. This is just,
I have just one question. Rabbi Kelman, I have a question.
Sure.
In the priests for the temple, they were supposed to be good looking. So doesn't that go along with the praise of the oratory skills?
So
like when you're a leader,
is interesting.
It's very interesting.
There's a couple of stories in the Gemara where somebody said, "Why are you so ugly?" So they said, "Go ask the person who made me." So good looking, some of it, but that you can everybody can make themselves look better. In other words, a Kohen couldn't have a moom, a defect, or that's a hard parsha actually to understand.
It's a hard parsha.
For our generation to say that, like if a Kohen, if he's missing an arm, he can't duchen, like we don't like that because we're very into,
Right.
right.
And in
I-
our generation, also the ability to speak could also be
Right.
considered
Right.
not so politically correct,
Right.
politically correct.
No,
But it's hard to be inspired. I agree totally with you. It's much more inspirational to be in the presence of a
right. I mean,
monumental speaker.
there's a difference between a sermon and a Dvar Torah. And today,
Yes.
many rabbis give a Dvar Torah. Dvar Torah is very nice, but it's not a sermon. And it's mussar and inspiration and cadence and the way you speak. And I think it's something missing in our generation. I really do. I really, anyways, but all those laws about defects is really only in the temple. All the modern authorities feel today like a person in a wheelchair can have an aliyah, or a blind person can have an aliyah. Rav Moshe has a famous, tshuva that you can bring a seeing eye dog into a shul. Consider so we do have the halacha does accept we're much more open to these things, but in terms of what the Torah says in the temple, the Torah is pretty strict about these laws. But how you look, what you have natural comes from God. What you do with it is up to you. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, we'll wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Be well.
You can get every week speeches from Rabbi Lamb.
Yes, I know. I get that. I'm on that email list. Yeah. I know that. But it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to hear it.
But it is so powerful to realize the beauty and how
every word is handwritten. Normally, he wrote them. I mean, he typed them a little handwritten. It's beautiful, right? They worked hard. I know.
They're timeless. That's what was always so amazing.
But they would spend hours to give a 15-minute sermon. They would spend 5, 6, 7 hours to prepare.
Right.
No rabbi today is going to do that. I want to give a Daf Yomi shir instead. I can learn 5 Blat Daf Yomi in the time preparing for a 50-minute speech. But you know what? The 50-minute speech can have a greater impact than those 5 pages that you forget a week later. It's complicated.
There's artistry there.
Everything's complicated. Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay.